Good morning. Glad y'all are here. This morning's lesson is entitled Christian Confrontation with Culture. Text comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 11 beginning. O ye Corinthians, our mouth is open unto you, our heart is enlarged. Ye are not straitened in us, but ye are straitened in your own bowels. Now for recompense in the same, I speak as unto my children, be ye also enlarged. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness, and what communion hath light with darkness, and what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel, and what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God, as God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Almighty. Then James 1 and verse 27 says, Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Now, I want to, again, caution at the beginning of this, how you approach the people that you know will be based upon how well you know them and how well they know you, and mutual respect and things like that. And it should always be kept in mind that when you're talking about personal things or spiritual things, which are absolutely personal things, any criticism, any critique, any disagreement is a serious matter. I mean, nobody likes to be told they're wrong. I mean, just most people just don't like to be told they're wrong. And I understand that. I mean, I don't like to be told, of course, they're so rare that I'm wrong, but it's the idea that it's personal. And nobody likes to be told that something that they treasure is wrong, or they ought not to be doing it, or whatever. So how you approach them is something that you have to determine. But for the purpose of this lesson, I'm going to assume that we're doing it with all the love and kindness and tenderness and consideration that we can possibly muster on our best day. So everything I say, you have to look at it through that vision. So keep that in mind as we go through. The word confrontation is the act of confronting or the state of being confronted, as especially a meeting face to face. It also means a conflict involving armed forces, as in a nuclear confrontation, which we don't want. It's also defined as discord or a clash of opinions and ideas, which is basically what this lesson is dealing with. The word culture is the arts, beliefs, customs, institutions, and other products of human work and thought considered as a unit, especially with regard to a particular time or social group. These arts, beliefs, and other products considered with respect to a particular subject or mode of expression. It's the set of predominating attitudes and behavior that characterize a group or organization, which is, again, the basic part of this lesson. And I was thinking about it this morning as I was reviewing the lesson, and I guess the easiest way I can relate it is the difference between the northern culture and the southern culture. Good people, don't misunderstand, good sound folks, but those folks up there, they're different. Okay. And the best way to illustrate it is there's me and William standing on the street corner of the 2nd and Main, downtown Dayton, Ohio, waiting on the light to change. And I look at William and said, a lot of weather we've been having lately. William looks at me and he's like, who are you? Now down here, we're standing downtown, getting ready to cross the street, go over to the Crown Restaurant and get something to eat. How you doing? I'm doing fine. A lot of weather we've been having lately, sure is. We just don't miss a beat. Driving down the street down here, lift up the finger, somebody coming at you the other way, and you get it back. Up north, somebody's going to say, who's that? Why'd they wave at you? I'm from there. I'm just telling you. It took me. Another one is, who's your daddy? Okay, I know who you are. I mean, I say, well, I worship at the Indianola Church. I'm a preacher at the Indianola Church. Okay, I know who you are. Okay. So how does a faithful Christian, with the conflict arising from clash of biblical values with the pagan values predominant in society today, react? And I left off the word react at the end of that sentence. How should we behave towards those that are without and that are living? And now there's good moral people out there, and I'm not necessarily talking about those specifically, but there are some folks that are just living a life that is so far out of bounds, it's just unbelievable. And then when you get down to worshiping God as God has directed, and things dealing with the church, there's a huge change there too. So how do you deal with that? And again, this is not an exhaustive lesson, because you can say, well, I've got an instance, what about this? And we can do that all day long. But for us, we have to be certain of our worldview ourselves. And a worldview is just a filter that you use to look out at the world and decide how you're going to behave. When somebody cuts you off in traffic, do you yell and scream and get upset and want to rip the steering wheel off? Or do you just say, well, it's another day in the life, you just back off and let them in? How do you do that? In Hebrews 11, verse 1 and 6, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, what that teaches us is that we have to know who God is. Not think, not believe, not feel, not want it to be this way or that, but who God is as he describes himself and what that means. I have to know that. I have to know that. Now, this is a lifetime of study. I understand. And then I have to behave in the way that he wants me to behave. So let's examine the evidence. How do we get there? Well, we examine the evidence. In Psalms 19 and verse 1, the heavens declare the handwork of the heavens glorify, the God in heaven. And I'm not going to get it right. But it's glory. Okay. Just left my head. Man, that's why I write things down. Psalms 19. And you have to have a plan to get up when you get down, too. Psalms 19 and verse 1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So the basic premise of verses 1 through 6 in Psalms 19 is that there's evidence out there that when you look at it reasonably, it draws you to the conclusion that somebody somewhere had to start this thing. That's called general revelation. Now, it doesn't tell us the who, but it tells us that this just couldn't have happened by accident. And if you've got a car sitting in the driveway, I guarantee you it didn't get there by accident. Somebody put it there, probably was you, but who made that thing? Okay, so the wind didn't blow through a junkyard and suddenly you've got your car sitting there in front of you. It doesn't work that way. And by the way, where'd all those parts come from in the first place? So somebody created that thing. In Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 18, the prophet tells us rather emphatically. He says, for thus saith the Lord God, the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. In other words, there's a reason for it. He just didn't say, let's make something today. No, he didn't do that. He had something in mind. He formed it to be inhabited. He formed it so somebody could live on it. So it had to be designed in such a way that we could live on it. I am the Lord and there's none else. Now, I read something the other day. I've read actually this same information in a couple different places, that the earth and the solar system in which it exists is a unique solar system as far as astronomers can determine. It is unique in the universe. From the distance from the sun to how it rotates on its axis and then travels around the sun, the fact that Jupiter's out there and it's so big, it has such a gravitational pull that when a meteorite or something comes racing through the solar system, it draws it to it so it doesn't hit us. And you look at the moon. I mean, you've got craters all over that moon. Why? Because that moon is drawing what gets past Saturn, Jupiter, it hits the moon. And occasionally we get bombarded with one upon occasion. So this universe is, and there's more details to it than that, but this universe is constructed in such a way. And by the way, another thing that just came to mind is where we are in the universe allows us to look at the rest of it. That if we were someplace different, we wouldn't see near what we're seeing now. Well, how'd all that happen? Well, I don't know, just woke up one day and alakazam, there it was. No. An effect demands a cause prior to, superior to, and separate from that which is created. Whoever made this pulpit isn't the pulpit. And he had to be smarter than that block of wood he was carving on. You say, well, that's right. Well, yeah. All right, so you look at this universe, and this thing didn't just show up one day. It just didn't suddenly appear when everybody come in here one Sunday morning, and the preacher says, boy, howdy, look at that. Where'd that come from? And nobody knows. Somebody built it. And somebody put it here. Well, okay, somebody built it, and somebody put it here. That's the thing. Now, the pulpit doesn't tell me who it is. Now, I might open it up and find a label in there somewhere. It's built by somebody somewhere in some particular place in the company and all that kind of stuff. But it just didn't show up. Existence must be explained and demands an uncaused first cause. Now, what does that mean? That means that there is a backstop beyond which you can't go, and there is somebody standing there. Okay, well, who created that God, and who created that God, and who created that? So that's called infinite regression, if you want a term for it. But there is a being, a mind and intellect, that is of such an existence that is able to say, let there be light, and there's light. Just call it, it's called ex nihilo, something out of nothing. If there was ever something, if there's ever nothing, rather, then why is there now something? It just didn't happen. It just didn't well, there's a little speck. We've talked about this before. There's a little speck and then it exploded. Well, my question is, who flicked their bic to cause it to explode? And then where'd that little tink, that little spot of something, where'd that come from? I don't know, the Easter Bunny. Santa Claus. Somebody like that. No. But that's what they're looking for. Magic isn't real, by the way. We must, once we've got those answered and settled in our mind, and it's something we need to do, we must then commit to a serious study of God's mind. If there is a mind out there, and there is, that brought all this into existence, and he did, or that mind did, then I think it would behoove us to figure out who that being is and what he thinks about stuff. So we don't build an altar to the unknown God, which implies that there is one and you know what he wants, and you don't. So he might want you to leave him alone. He might come out just because you stirred him up. Just saying. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, 9 through 13, just to briefly sum that thing up, there's the idea, first of all, of revelation. There's the information dump. There's the stuff that God put in the minds of those that revealed what he wanted revealed. And then there's inspiration. Once the stuff is there, how are we going to get it? How am I going to get this over there to Mike Joel? How is he going to know about it? Well, I'm going to have to come up with some way to communicate it to him. All right, and the Holy Spirit went into my mind and started picking out the exact words that would declare precisely what he wanted me to say. He just didn't say, by the way, here, Gina, say something. Here's the stuff I want you to tell him. Just however it comes to you. No, he didn't do that. The very words that they uttered was from their own minds. Luke at one point used, when he talked about the needle, it was a particular needle that a surgeon uses to suture your wound up. And it's kind of shaped in a U shape kind of a thing, so it can get, can sew it up. And it's a term that a physician would use, and Luke was a physician. So, that's just, God used, the Holy Spirit used what was there to express exactly what he wanted expressed. So we have to be certain of our worldview. In other words, I have to know that the information I have is what it ought to be what God wants me to be and do. And secondly, I must then have the right attitude and the right motivation. In Galatians 5 and verse 6, for in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything nor uncircumcision. Doesn't matter who you are. But faith, which worketh by love. We're not just checking off boxes here. Why are you doing it? Well, because of my love for the Lord. Well, why do you love him? Because he first loved us. Well, how do you know he loved you? For God so loved the world that gave his only begotten Son. I think that's a pretty big deal. But the task of Jesus, and then Jude verse 23, chapter 1 verse 23 says, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh. So, in other words, it may be somebody that's not really at the top of your list of my good buddies and people I want to do stuff with. It may be that neighbor that you just wish they would pack up and move away. But somehow, in some way, an opportunity presents itself for you to teach them the truth. You teach them the truth. I don't find anywhere in the Bible where it says I have to like the person I'm preaching to. I mean, I don't imagine Stephen appreciated those folks as chunking rocks at him. But would he tell them the truth? He sure would. Why? Because their souls were condemned as they were. And his job was to teach lost people the truth. But the task of Jesus ought to be our own. What is it I'm supposed to do? Well, what did Jesus do? Luke 19 and verse 10, for the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost. Well, who's that? Well, it's pretty much everybody out there. You don't have to go far to find a prospect. Well, no, let me back that up. A suspect. Everybody's a suspect. Few people are prospects. There's somebody, if they're fogging a mirror, then they're a suspect. But are they a prospect? Are you interested in finding out what your Bible has to say about that? Well, no, I'm not. Okay. They're not interested. That doesn't mean you cross them off the list, because you never know. Something may happen. I saw a survey once years ago where there are life changes that happen to us when we are the most open to new information. The death of a spouse, getting a job, losing a job, moving in or out, birth of children, all kinds of things like that. You can go down the list of stuff that when people are... That's why when I preach a funeral sermon, they get the plan of salvation. James Bradshaw said, I want you to preach the gospel. You got it, brother. And I did. Because there are people that are there that will never be there again. And it may well be the only time they've ever heard the truth being preached. Why would I pass that up? Our job is not to win arguments, but souls. John chapter 4, Jesus is sitting on that well in Sychar. And that woman shows up. He asks for a drink of water, and she's stunned. First of all, it's a Jew speaking to a woman that's a Samaritan woman. And that just doesn't happen. So he goes down and he starts talking. And notice, and you ought to go back and read that and notice how he talked to her. Yeah, and you're not living with your husband now, are you? No, he didn't do that at all. He said, go get your husband. She said, well, I'm not married. He said, no. He said, you're right. And neither were you married to the 5 guys before this one. Well, you're a prophet. Well, he was. But the thing is Jesus didn't talk brusquely to her. He talked straight. He was straightforward. But he spoke in such a way that she listened. That's how we ought to do it. Now, nobody's perfect starting that thing off. It takes some practice, trial and error. So then in the third place, what do we do? What do we do once we've got number 1 and 2 down? Once we know what we think and believe and why, and once we've gotten our attitude lined out the way it ought to be, then what do you do? Well, it's the idea of authority. Who are you to tell me what I ought to do? Who died and put you in charge of telling me that I'm a sinner going to hell? Who did that? And who do you think you are anyways? Okay, so you have to be careful about this. But the fact that moral law exists demands a moral law. You know, if you just, illustration, you just walk up down the street and you just randomly punch somebody in the back of the head. What'd you do that for? And you're going to get arrested for that. Well, why? Well, you ought not to punch people in the back of the head. Well, why not? It's against the law. I don't like the law. He didn't like being punched in the back of the head. Or lying to somebody. Or cheating, which is also lying to somebody. And I mean, there's any number of things that we understand. You know, vulgar language out in public. It used to be the fact that if anybody said anything, some curse word out in public, they'd be shamed for it. Now it's just a course of action. Everybody does it, which doesn't make it right. But why is that wrong? You pick out the simplest thing that you can think of that is wrong, and then ask yourself, why? How do I know that's wrong? Well, we just don't do it. Okay, why? Why don't we do whatever X is? Why don't we do that? There's a moral law. We all have a sense of oughtness. Now, let me show you how extreme this can be. And I've given you the story before. I worked at the county jail in Bartow, Florida, and we had a guy came in. He was basically catatonic. I mean, he just stood in the corner. And I don't remember now what he had. He had something in his hands. So we tried to take it from him. I mean, we didn't just jump on him and try to, But, it's like you got a hold of something and he didn't want to turn loose of it. No. He wasn't completely catatonic, but he was, And why was he saying no? Because it was his. Whatever it was his. It was in his hands at any rate. So he was basically telling us, it's wrong for you to take this. Take a baby's pacifier from his mouth. Pull it out of its mouth. I saw a set of twins sitting there. One had a pacifier and the other reached over and took it, put it in his mouth. First one started crying, tried to get it back. And the second one started fighting him over it. Why? Well, it's my pacifier. I've got it now. No, it's not. I had it first. Well, I've got it now. They got in a fight. It was wrong. He was wrong to take my pacifier. Yeah, well, I got it now. So, why? Why is that? Even on that level, there's a sense of oughtness, of right and wrong, and you shouldn't do that. Why? That's the question. Well, because there's a moral lawgiver. And by the way, I don't know of any society that says it's okay to just cold-bloodedly murder somebody. If you pick the society and you pick the time, and we could send you back there or forward there in a time machine and give you whatever your weapon of choice was, it's never right to just cold-bloodedly walk up and just kill. It's never been right. Somebody's always upset by it if it's not just the person that you murdered. Why is that wrong? Why? Well, they're humans. So, there has to be a moral law from which we can draw a conclusion that's right. And the truth has to be absolute. It's never right to murder somebody. It's never right to cold-bloodedly, arbitrarily murder. It's just never right. It's objective. It's absolute. That is, it's like this pulpit right here. It just is. It's just there. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't know about you, and it's always going to be this unless obviously we destroy it. But truth is that way. It's just a chunk of marble sitting there, and it doesn't care about you, doesn't know about you. It just is. That's truth. It's absolute. It's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. And is it obtainable? It's obtainable. We can know what it is. 2 plus 2 always equals 4 given a base 10 numbering system. It's never anything else. It's never anything else. That's absolute, objective, and obtainable. We can know that. I don't care what your labels are. I'm not, your labels are something else. I don't care what they are. But you get that number of objects together. You get this number of objects together. Now I'm holding up one finger. I'm holding up this many, then that many. Now I don't care what you call it. That many never changes regardless of what you call it. That's truth. And it doesn't care about you or me or anybody else. It just is. And we have it. In Ezekiel, they both look alike. Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 4. Behold, all souls are mine. God's the sole proprietor. As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. Then if you look over in verses 20 through 23, he says, the soul that sitteth it shall die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him. The wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. But if the wicked shall turn from all his sins that he hath committed, and keep all my statutes, and do that which is lawful and right, he shall surely live. He shall not die. Now that's just the case. That's just the way it is. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that every one may receive the things done in his body, according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. You will stand there and you will give answer for what you've done. And we have that truth. John 14 and 26. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you, and Jesus speaking to the apostles, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance whatsoever I have said unto you. So he's not speaking to you and me, he's speaking to the apostles, because I've never heard Jesus talk. Just saying. John 16:13, howbeit when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth, for he shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak, and he will show you things to come. Then John 17:17, sanctify them through thy truth, thy word is truth. So there's a standard by which we are to live and behave and order our life. We are to judge properly. Now a lot of folks like to quote Matthew 7 verse 1. No, judge not that you be not judged, which is awfully judgmental, by the way, if you stop and think about it. And always point that out to them. Well, Gary, judge not lest ye be judged. And he says, preacher, do you realize you just judged me? They get all upset. And he goes on and says in John 6, after he's just told them not to judge, give not that which is holy unto the dogs. You have to make a judgment. Neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. And he says, beware, verse 15, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Now, if we can't judge in any sense, how do you do that? And I've had people read that to me. After they've quoted Matthew 7, read verse 6 and then read verse 15. They don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to handle that. John 7 verse 24, judge righteous judgment. So there is a judgment that we are to judge, and we do that when we decide not to cast holy things unto the dogs or pearls before swine, and so we can determine who a false prophet is. We can know what a lawful marriage is. In Genesis 22, 21 through 24, God brought Eve to Adam, and they became one flesh. Boy, that's a lesson. Well, that's a tough lesson to learn there, brother. I'll just tell you. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, Paul says, to avoid fornication, let every husband have his own wife. So there's and we can know which one isn't a lawful marriage. In Matthew 19, Jesus says, have ye not read how he which made them male and female at the beginning? It's Adam and Eve, not Bruce and Steve. It isn't. You can call a relationship marriage, but it isn't if it doesn't meet the divine qualifications and standards. Mark 6 and verse 18. Well, let's see. Matthew 19, the Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him and saying unto him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Now Mark 6 and verse 18, for John had said unto Herod, it is not lawful for thee to have thy brother's wife. He was married to her. It was not lawful to have that marriage. It was an unlawful marriage. Man lost his head over it, but he taught him the truth. And I don't care if 9-robed lawyers in Washington, D.C. say something is marriage that isn't. I don't care. I don't care. They don't have the right to say that. They don't have the authority to say that. I'll hand you the Constitution. I want you to find in the U.S. Constitution where it says anything about marriage. It doesn't. They don't have a right to say that. And they don't have a right to come in here and tell us that we're going to marry two people who don't have a right to be married. Well, they have the power to do that, but not the right. Okay? Let them try to tell me what I'm going to do about that. That's what I got for you. And okay, lesson, Gene. Just preach it. That any sexual relationship not complying with Genesis chapter 2 or 1 Corinthians 7 is fornication and therefore sinful. I can, with a few questions that are honestly answered, I can determine whether any relationship is lawful or fornication. Now, I honestly answered now, pointed questions, honestly answered, and I can tell you whether that relationship is fornication or not. Well, you're judging. Well, yeah. What's your point? You're exactly correct. That is a judgment. You're no question about it. I insisted. Matter of fact, I'm getting ready to pass judgment on you. Now, my standard is the right standard applied correctly. We can know the limits of civil government. Civil government is there to protect the righteous from the unrighteous and to punish the unrighteous. That's it. Period. And to do things for us that we can't do for ourselves. You know, we can't get a Navy or an Army to protect our borders. Well, we can. We're still not doing it, but that's another issue too. Verse 4 says, "For he is the minister of God to thee for good." Not for bad, for good. "But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain." That sword, the sword that the magistrate carried was a replica of the sword that the executioner used to take your head off with. Okay? "For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. And he leaves me and you alone because we're righteous." Now, we're required to pay taxes. We have to support that effort. But anything beyond that effort is stealing your money. Oh, you're talking politics. No, I'm book, chapter, and verse, brother. You don't have to like it. It's just what it is. Remember that what I said about truth? It just is. It doesn't care about you. Doesn't know about you. Doesn't know whether it's hot or cold. It just is. "I can know that theft is wrong and that honest labor is good." Ephesians 4:20. "Let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him work that which is honest with his hands." Honesty isn't the best policy. It's the only policy. Ephesians 4 and verse 25. "Speak truth one to another. Lie not, speak truth." Only language that edifies is to be used. Ephesians 4:29, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." Would you want it to be said to you in the tone of voice it was used to be said to you in the first place? No. Well, then don't say it. Don't say it. Well, something needs to be said. Okay, but here's your parameters. Here's your guidelines. Anything you say has to be within those guidelines. Now, as I said earlier, it's hard to offer criticism, so it's appreciated. You know, I'll just tell you. By the way, everybody loves being criticized. Raise your hand. Let the record show that nobody raised their hand. Okay. Godliness has consequences. The bottom line of all this is godliness has consequences. When you try to live a godly life before God and man, you're going to irritate man to death. Almost, well, to the point sometimes of your own death. Paul said, "Yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution." And that doesn't mean you'll be put to death. You may lose your job. You may be shunned by your friends. You know, things like that. Peter says, "For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind, for he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, living that righteous life. That he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lusts, excess of wine, revellings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries, wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you." So when a rounder, we used to call it, becomes a Christian and stops being a rounder, people notice that, and his friends become really critical. Oh, you think you're better than us? Well, the answer is yes. But I don't think it I am. But you don't say that. I mean, you don't say that. At least not in those words. But you better be better than them. They are. I hope I'm better than what I was when I was a kid, when I was much younger. I hope. I think I've gotten there. I'm still getting there. Still improving. But it boils down to knowing what it is you know and why you know it. And then how to relate that to people that need to hear it in such a way that they'll, if not immediately, eventually they'll appreciate what you've tried to do for them. That's the kicker. That's the difficult thing. Because like I said, nobody likes to be confronted with the error of their ways. Nobody. That's too broad. Relatively speaking, few people. Only 8 got on the ark. So, think of all the people that didn't want to hear it. Okay? He was a preacher of righteousness for over 120 years, was Noah. And they didn't want to hear it. Only 8 people got on the ark. Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot. Man. Write it down, preacher. Lot only got his wife and 2 daughters out, and his wife didn't make it. And his 2 daughters corrupted themselves. So, what are you going to do? Well, they told us at school, just preach the gospel, be in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Tell them what they need to hear when they need to hear it, when they don't want to hear it, and that's what you do. Jesus said, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be condemned or shall be damned. Some folks say, well, I don't think you have to be baptized. Well, then Jesus said you'll be damned or you'll stand condemned. I don't say that with any pleasure. I say that with some sense of alarm because there are people that are lost and will never obey the gospel because they have to be baptized to be saved. And they know you don't have to be. But yet Mark 16:16 is still there. It doesn't care about what you do, think, or say. It's still there. And the only ones that will go to heaven will be the ones that have been sanctified by the blood of the Lamb. And the only ones sanctified by the Lamb's blood are those that have been baptized into him. And now why tarriest thou? Rise and be baptized and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. But it's the blood, Revelation 1 verse 5. They are washed from their sins in his blood. So if you're not a child of God, become one. If you are, but you've been unfaithful, come back. If we can pray for you in some form or fashion that you need, let us know. If there's something you have a question about, let us know. We've set aside this time to sing a hymn of invitation to allow you to come up and let us to this front pew and let us know what your particular spiritual needs are, and we'll do our best to help you. But we invite you to come. All together we stand and sing.